So what I'm going to show you in this video is how to make a frittata. So the ingredients that we've got for today are 2 eggs per person, seasoned with salt and pepper, some cooked potato, this has just been boiled in this instance, some leftover vegetables from previously in the week. So here I have steamed broccoli and steamed kale. I've got a red onion that's been cooked in olive oil, a tomato, a large tomato that has just been diced, some olives sliced, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, a couple of garlic cloves and some grated cheese. So I'm heating some oil in a pan. This is olive oil, but it doesn't have to be. You can use whatever you generally use. And the first thing I'm going to do is cook the vegetables that haven't already been cooked. And in this case, it's the tomatoes. So normally, at this time of year, I wouldn't buy tomatoes. I'm filming this in March. And I think tomatoes tend to be a little bit under-flavoured and uninteresting. And I normally only buy them when they're in season in England. But this has come in the veg box, and it needs using up, otherwise it will just be wasted. So I'm adding it to my frittata. I've cooked it for a while, and now I've added the sliced garlic, and that will just soften nicely with the tomatoes. They'll give off a lovely smell together. So I'm using a non-stick pan, which is pretty important really for anything vaguely omelette-y. The one I've got here comes from IKEA. It's quite heavy. It wasn't hugely expensive, but it's very solid. You want a heavy bottom really, because that will disperse the heat evenly and you won't get patches where your food's going to catch. Also, with cheap non-stick pans, it's possible for the coating to come off and get into the food, which is really not what you want. These ones seem to be pretty solid and well bonded, so I'd recommend them. They do a variety of sizes, and they're a good addition to your kitchen kit. I say that a frittata is more of a process than a recipe, because it's one of those dishes where you can use up what you've got. So if at the end of the week, when the housekeeping's getting a bit low, you can go through your fridge and store cupboard and find most of the ingredients, and it's really handy for emptying out all the little plastic pots in the fridge of leftover food from previous meals. The traditional frittata is egg with potato, chorizo maybe, onions, garlic, but I never stick to that. I keep mine veggie as a rule, and there are always things that can go into it. So it's really up to you. And once you're familiar with the process, it gets very comfortable just sort of throwing one together from what's available. So the next thing I'm going to add is the potatoes. Now these have just been boiled. I never peel potatoes because life's too short. And also, most of the nutrients are just below the skin. So by being a little bit lazy, you're actually improving your nutritional value of your dish, which is always a bonus. So these have been cut into about 1 centimetre dice and then boiled until they're just cooked. Again, you don't want any pap here. And if you overcook them, you'll have mashed potato in the bottom of your pan. So stop before they're completely done. The onions are going in now. These have been cooked in olive oil, but again, that doesn't really matter. It can be any oil that you're used to using or you've got in your kitchen. It doesn't matter. It could also be white onion, or if you've got a bunch of spring onions that are getting near the end of their days, they can be chopped up and go in just as well. It doesn't really matter what you use, but onion does add a good flavour to it. So what I'm doing here is not browning the ingredients, I'm just heating them through. because you want them all hot. So the other thing I've done now is I've turned my grill on so that can be warming up. Now I'm adding my pre-cooked vegetables, my kale and my broccoli, but that would really depend on whatever I had available. You know, I've quite often got some roast carrots and cauliflower in the fridge. They go in just as happily. The important thing is that they are not overcooked, though. I think you need to. Vegetables are always better cooked slightly al dente, so there's a bit of bite to them. And it does mean that if you've got any left over, then they're not going to deteriorate too much in the next recipe. So these are nice and bright green, which is a clue to me that they're not overcooked. So I've just stirred those in. My next addition is the olives, and you could use green or black in this instance. I like to add some olives because when you get some, you have that sort of pop of saltiness in your mouth, which is a really good contrast to the eggy taste, which is generally quite bland. So they work well. I just slice them up so they distribute better through the dish. And now a teaspoon of smoked paprika. Smoked paprika is one of my favourite seasonings, and it adds sort of richness and depth without heat. I add it to chilies and anything to do with eggs. It's a good standby, I think. So I'm stirring that in, just cooking it through. And you can see here we've got a fair old pan of vegetables. So the meal is going to be quite well balanced. We've got carbohydrate with the potato, a lot of vegetables, some protein from the eggs. So the frittata in itself is pretty well standalone sorted. You don't have to worry too much about what you put with it. Though I think I'd probably serve a salad. So next in go the eggs. These have just been whisked up with some salt and pepper. I've allowed 2 per portion. And I'm going to treat it sort of much as I would an omelette now. So I'm going to pick my pan up and turn it around and allow the egg to roll about and fill in the gaps. Because there's such a lot of vegetable in here, I'm going to have to manipulate it a bit, but that's okay. You can push stuff from the outside to the middle and allow the egg to run through. What you want to ensure, though, is that the egg has settled completely through the vegetable, because it's the egg that's going to hold everything together. And if you don't, you'll just have a pile of veg on your plate. So you can see the edges now are starting to cook. They've changed colour. And I'm just going to keep it here on a gentle heat. It's important that it's gentle because you've got to get some warmth through to the top from the bottom. And if your heat's too high, the bottom will burn, and that's never going to be a good thing. Okay, so I'm flipping some veg into the centre so that the egg can get to the outside. Pressing it down, checking throughout how it's cooking. Once I've got a solid base of cooked egg, I can move on to the next stage. And that's looking about right. So now a bit of cheese on the top. As much as anything, this is to give it a sort of brown and visually attractive finish. But cheese always goes well with egg. And what I've used here is some hard goat cheese, which I particularly like. It's a strong flavour, which means I don't have to use very much. And I think it's important to be a bit wary of cheap cheeses because you have to use so much more to get any flavour. And you end up eating a lot of cheese, a lot of fat, and it doesn't save you a lot of money. Okay, so that's been under the grill, and you can see now that the top is bubbling and brown. The colours are shining through and it's looking pretty great. So this works well as a hot dish, but also it's really useful cold. So I will save whatever is left and it can go into pitters, or it will go into a salad box for lunch the next day. It's really very useful. So I hope you've seen something that you can add to your repertoire, something that will help you stretch your budget and use up your leftovers and give you something delicious to eat.